China, from a semi-colony to a people's democracy. G. Asta 5. This is a summary. The establishment of the People's Republic of China on October 1, 1949, marked the end of a long struggle for national liberation and democracy, and ended over a century of foreign capitalist domination. Prior to this, China, despite being formally independent, was economically dependent on imperialist powers such as Britain, the USA, and Japan. These powers competed to exploit China's resources and establish it as their colony. Here's a more detailed breakdown. Semi-colonial status. Even until the beginning of the Second World War, China remained in a semi-colonial position, with foreign powers controlling key aspects of its economy. Imperialist control. According to Stalin in 1927, China was in a semi-colonial position due to financial and economic domination of imperialism, and this remained true even when Japan invaded China in 1937. Foreign domination. Foreign powers controlled essential industries such as railways, factories, mines, and banks. They also utilized treaty rights, secured through force, to further their control. These rights included seizure of territory via leasing, establishment of foreign-administered settlements and concessions, extraterritoriality for foreign subjects, meaning they were not subject to Chinese laws, control over navigation in Chinese waters and rivers, the opening of Chinese ports for foreign trade, stationing of foreign troops and warships in China, control over Chinese state revenue. Economic monopoly. The economic dominance of imperialists was based on their monopoly positions in key sectors of the Chinese economy, such as foreign trade, finance, transport, and industry. Comprador bourgeoisie. Imperialism relied on the comprador bourgeoisie, who acted as intermediaries between foreign capital and the Chinese market, as well as semi-feudal classes such as landlords and the bureaucracy. These groups, according to Stalin, were significant in the oppression of the Chinese people and were a target of the agrarian revolution. Feudal remnants. Feudal remnants, like the power of landlords and the bureaucracy, were key factors in oppression in China, and the agrarian revolution was directed against them. Intertwined oppression. Imperialism supported feudal structures, leading to an intertwined system of semi-colonial and semi-feudal oppression. The Chinese national liberation struggle was directed against both imperialist and feudal oppression. Influence of the October Revolution. The October Revolution had a major influence on the national liberation movement in China by breaking the imperialist chains and inspiring the Chinese working class. It also provided support and revolutionary experience. Mao Zedong noted that it was through the October Revolution that the Chinese discovered Marxism-Leninism. The sources describe the development of the Chinese Revolution, focusing on the interplay of class forces and the struggle against imperialism and feudalism. Here's a summary of the key points. Emergence of new classes. After World War I, alongside the peasantry and landlords, the proletariat and the national bourgeoisie began to play a significant role in China. Rise of the proletariat. Despite its numerical weakness, the Chinese proletariat organized rapidly, influenced by the Great October Socialist Revolution and class battles against foreign capital. The proletariat, led by the Chinese Communist Party, became a leading force in the anti-imperialist movement, demonstrating strong revolutionary spirit, consciousness, and organization. The proletariat gained significant influence among the urban poor and peasantry. Political strikes in Shanghai and Hong Kong in 1925 marked a turning point in the struggle against foreign imperialists. The national bourgeoisie. The Chinese bourgeoisie consisted of several strata with differing positions on imperialism and feudalism. The industrial bourgeoisie, unlike the comprador bourgeoisie, was affected by imperialist oppression, which hampered the development of national industry. This led to the participation of the national bourgeoisie in the national liberation movement at a certain stage. However, as the movement grew, the bourgeoisie's class interests conflicted with national interests, leading them to side with imperialism. The national bourgeoisie's political weakness and dependence on imperialism facilitated the proletariat's leadership role. The peasantry. The peasantry, comprising over 80% of China's population, faced dual oppression from landlords, merchant and usurer capital, militarists, and imperialist powers. They were the main force in the national liberation struggle against imperialism and feudal exploitation. The peasantry was not monolithic, with stratification into kulaks, middle peasants, landless poor, and farm laborers, which led to internal divisions and the unification of kulaks with landlords. Other classes. The urban petty bourgeoisie, including artisans, petty traders, unemployed intelligentsia, and ruined peasantry, also played a role, with some joining the proletariat and others gravitating towards the bourgeoisie. The petty bourgeois intelligentsia was similarly divided, with some supporting the proletariat and others aligning with landlords and imperialist circles. Initial united front. The double oppression of imperialism and feudalism led to a united front involving workers, peasants, petty bourgeoisie intelligentsia, and the national bourgeoisie, which was politically united in the Kuomintang. However, the national bourgeoisie sought to limit the revolution to territorial gains. Betrayal and shift. In 1927, the national bourgeoisie betrayed the national liberation cause and aligned with imperialists and landlords. The petty bourgeois intelligentsia followed, transforming the Kuomintang into a reactionary bloc. This betrayal was driven by the growing mass involvement in the revolution. Stages of the revolution. The Chinese Revolution went through stages, with the first stage being a national united front against imperialist oppression, which was the Canton period. The allies of the proletariat were the peasantry, urban poor, petty bourgeois intelligentsia, and national bourgeoisie, with varying reliability. The second stage was an agrarian revolution directed against internal enemies, especially feudal lords and the feudal regime, while also maintaining its anti-imperialist goals. The Allies shifted to the peasantry, urban poor, and petty bourgeois intelligentsia. Agrarian revolution. The agrarian revolution was a key component of the bourgeois democratic revolution in China, marked by the confluence of struggle against feudalism and imperialism. It involved millions of peasants establishing their own power in some regions. The petty bourgeois intelligentsia betrayed this stage as well due to the pressure of the growing agrarian movement. Proletariat leadership. The departure of the national bourgeoisie and petty bourgeois intelligentsia strengthened the movement, solidifying the proletariat's leadership. This involved a deepening of the anti-feudal and anti-imperialist direction, agrarian revolution, and expansion of the mass movement. The movement was further strengthened by consolidating the mass base and eliminating wavering elements. Soviet regions. Despite setbacks, the struggle continued, leading to the liberation of 600,000 square kilometers by 1933–34 under the leadership of the Communist Party. These areas established democratic districts governed by Soviets, which were considered a transition to China's non-capitalist or socialist development. Continued struggle. The Chinese workers and peasants, led by the Communist Party and Mao Zedong, continued the agrarian revolution against feudalism and imperialism. The Communist Party fought against both external forces and internal traitors. Agrarian reform was carried out, land was distributed to peasants, and imperialist oppression was eliminated in the Soviet regions. The sources detail the Chinese Communist Party's (CCP) efforts to form a united front against Japanese aggression, and the subsequent changes in the political landscape during the Second World War. Here's a detailed summary based on the provided text: Japanese aggression and the call for unity. The Japanese seizure of Manchuria in 1931 and subsequent aggression in North China and Inner Mongolia posed a severe threat to China's national independence. The CCP emerged as the leader in organizing a united front against Japanese aggression. As early as 1932, the CCP proposed a joint struggle against Japanese imperialism to the Kuomintang, KMT. In 1935, the CCP called for an all-Chinese government of national defense and a united anti-Japanese army based on cooperation between the CCP and the KMT. The CCP repeatedly appealed to various political parties and military units for a united front and proposed an all-Chinese conference for national security. In 1936, the CCP continued to seek an end to the civil war with the KMT to focus on fighting the Japanese. CCP's strategic moves. To demonstrate their resolve to resist the Japanese, the CCP moved the main forces of the Chinese Red Army to the northwest of China in the border regions of Shenxi and Suningxia in 1936. This region became the main base for the People's Liberation Movement for the next 10 years. Obstacles to unity and the Xi'an incident. Despite the CCP's efforts, the Nanking government and the KMT did not agree to negotiate. The lack of agreement with the KMT highlighted their reactionary stance and increased the CCP's influence. The Xi'an incident in 1936, where General Chong Su-liang arrested Chiang Kai-shek for attempting to attack the Red Army, could have led to a larger civil war. The CCP intervened to ensure a peaceful resolution to the Xi'an incident, further demonstrating their commitment to a united front. Formation of the United Front. On February 10, 1937, the CCP made concrete proposals for a united front to the KMT. The KMT initially ignored these proposals until Japan's attack on China on July 7, 1937, forced them to reconsider. Popular indignation at the Japanese aggression compelled the KMT to recognize a united front. A formal agreement was never reached, but a united front was created on the basis of mutual concessions. The CCP agreed to fight for the implementation of the three principles of Sun Yat-sen, cease the struggle to overthrow the KMT, abandon the slogan of Sovietizing China, and end the confiscation of landlords' land. Rename the border Soviet regions of Shenxi and Suningxia as a special border region with local organs of power subordinate to the central government but distinct from the KMT regions. Rename the Red Army and include it into a United People's Revolutionary Army, subordinate to a United War Council. The CCP fulfilled all its obligations promptly. Reasons for changing Soviet forms of power. Mao Zedong explained that the CCP gave up the Soviet form of power not because it was unsuitable, but because the Japanese invasion necessitated a unified national front. The slogan of a democratic republic was adopted in place of Soviets to unite against fascism and Japanese imperialism. Characteristics of the United Front. The bourgeoisie was unwilling to lead an active national liberation struggle and lost the confidence of the people. The bourgeoisie actively opposed the United Front and continued to compromise with imperialism. The proletariat, under the leadership of the CCP, became the leader of the United Anti-Japanese Front. The United Front's program now included the democratization of the country and improvement of conditions for the working class. Shifting dynamics during the war. The war weakened the national bourgeoisie and strengthened the landlords and merchant bourgeoisie. This led to the reactionary policy of passive defense against the Japanese and hostility towards Chinese democracy. The four families, Chiang Kai-shek, Chen Lifu, Sung Tse-wei, and Kung Xionghe, gained significant economic power by utilizing government positions and war regulations for personal enrichment, even through contraband trade with the enemy. Mao Zedong characterized the Four Families' economic domination as monopolizing the economic life of the entire country with billions of dollars in capital. The monopoly capital of the Four Families was semi-feudal and comprador in nature, linked to landlords and dependent on foreign capital. The imperialists supported the Kuomintang as a tool against the national liberation movement, and American loans enriched the Four Families while further enslaving the country. This led to increased exploitation of the working class through inflation, price speculation, high taxes, and land confiscation. The increasing dissatisfaction with the Kuomintang resulted in the departure of the petty and middle bourgeoisie, intelligentsia, students, and other patriotic elements from the landlord bourgeois bloc. These groups joined the democratic camp, led by the Communist Party, advocating for democratic reorganization, growth of the democratic base. The social base of the Democratic National Liberation Movement expanded during the war. The liberated regions grew from the Shenxi-Kansu-Ningxia border region to 15 regions with a total population of 95,500,000 people. These regions served as operational bases for the People's Revolutionary Army. They also implemented the democratic changes outlined by the United Front's program. In contrast to the Kuomintang's policies, the democratic regions focused on developing production and improving living conditions. The growing strength of the Democratic Front was demonstrated by the concessions forced from the Kuomintang and their 1944 negotiations with the Communist Party. Here is a very detailed summary based on the sources and our conversation history, further elaborating on the key concepts and events. The United Front against Japanese aggression and the seeds of democratic change formation of the United Front. The Chinese Communist Party, CCP, took the lead in advocating for a united front against Japanese aggression. Recognizing the threat posed by Japan, the CCP sought to unite various groups, including the Kuomintang, KMT, to form a cohesive resistance. This involved repeated appeals for cooperation and proposals for an all-Chinese government of national defense. CCP's commitment to unity. The CCP demonstrated their commitment by moving their forces to the northwest in 1936, establishing a base for the People's Liberation Movement. They also intervened in the Sion incident to prevent further civil war and strengthen the United Front. The CCP made significant concessions, agreeing to fight for Sun Yat-sen's principles, end the slogan of Sovietizing China, and integrate the Red Army into a united force. These actions were crucial in establishing their credibility and commitment to national unity against the common enemy. The United Front's program. The program of this United Front was not aimed at a fundamental reconstruction of Chinese society, but instead focused on resisting Japanese aggression, uniting various classes and implementing democratic reforms, including democratization of the political system and better conditions for the working people. The evolving dynamics of the United Front and the rise of New Democracy as a tool for resistance. Mao Zedong emphasized the interdependence of the struggle against Japan and the struggle for democracy, asserting that democracy was essential for an effective fight against Japan and that the anti-Japanese struggle created conditions for democratic movements. He identified democracy and freedom as central tasks. Democratic changes during wartime. The CCP, in liberated regions, began to implement democratic changes, which became a model for the entire country. These changes included improvements for workers and lower rents and loan interest rates. This success underscored the feasibility of democratic reforms even under the harsh conditions of war, and also highlighted the need for democratic reconstruction across the country to eliminate imperialism and feudal oppression. The program of New Democracy. The CCP developed a comprehensive program of New Democracy, outlined in Mao's works from 1939 to 1945, advocating for a bourgeois democratic revolution as a step toward socialism. This program aimed to overthrow the dictatorship of big landlords and the bourgeoisie and establish an independent, free, united, and democratic China. Key elements of this program included land ownership for those who till it, state control of key industries, and the elimination of imperialist and feudal oppression. Specific program and its limitations. During the war, the CCP adopted a more specific program, calling for the expulsion of Japanese invaders, an end to the KMT dictatorship, and the establishment of a coalition government. This program, however, made concessions to feudal and imperialist forces, postponing the confiscation of land and the restriction of foreign capital. This was done to maintain unity during the war and recognize that the USA and Britain were allies against Japan. The struggle for a democratic China post-World War II shifting focus after the war. With Japan's defeat in 1945, the focus shifted to democratizing China, which now included the struggle against American imperialism. The entry of the USSR into the war in the Pacific and the defeat of Japan created new opportunities for the democratic forces. The People's Liberation Army, PLA, liberated vast territories, where democratic rule and reforms were quickly established. American intervention and the Civil War. The U.S., seeking to establish political and economic dominance in China, intervened by occupying key points, transferring KMT troops, and providing military aid. This led to a civil war, as the KMT, with American support, attacked liberated regions. Despite their military superiority, the KMT and their allies were defeated. The U.S. was forced to begin a retreat by public opinion, leading to negotiations for the democratization of China. The failure of negotiations. Despite agreements reached between the Communist Party and the Kuomintang, the KMT did not intend to implement them. Instead, with the backing of the USA, the KMT launched a military offensive leading to full-scale civil war. The Communist Party's evolving strategy and the path to people's democracy, the leading role of the CCP. The CCP played a pivotal role in leading the national liberation movement. The party's policies and actions led to an increase in popular support and party membership. The CCP was recognized as the true defender of Chinese sovereignty against both Japanese and American imperialism. The CCP's policies were based upon Marxist-Leninist teaching on imperialism and used the experience of the Russian Bolsheviks, along with the teachings of Stalin. Strategic shifts and agrarian reform. The CCP recognized that the masses were ready for more radical changes and adapted their policies to the evolving situation. This involved a shift towards agrarian reform, including the partial confiscation of land from landlords, in response to the spontaneous agrarian movement within the liberated regions. The Communist Party rallied the people for more decisive struggle, deepening the democratic movement. The CCP moved towards a complete liquidation of the economic bases of the landlord class and monopoly capital, and a decisive struggle against American imperialism. This approach led to broader mass support, as people understood that compromise with the KMT and American imperialism would not lead to true democratic reorganization. Transition to people's democracy. The shift in the balance of power allowed the CCP to move toward a people's democratic republic, emphasizing the leadership of the working class and its alliance with the peasantry. This new phase was marked by a shift in slogans, from fighting against imperialism and feudal remnants to fighting against imperialism, feudalism, and big capital. The CCP also changed the question of power in a coalition government to one that excluded all reactionary elements. Land reform and economic transformation. The CCP implemented a wide agrarian reform, distributing land to landless and poor peasants, which significantly improved their living conditions. This reform broke up old land relationships and created a more equitable system. The CCP also focused on developing state-owned industry, transport and banks, which laid the economic foundation for the transition to socialism. The state-socialized sector played a key role, and development followed this path. The international context and the role of the Soviet Union influence of the Soviet Union. The victories of the Soviet Union against Nazi Germany and Japanese imperialism significantly impacted the Chinese Revolution. These victories weakened the imperialist forces and strengthened the democratic camp worldwide. The Soviet Union also played a crucial role in liberating Manchuria, which became a key base for the democratic movement in China. The international support was indispensable to the Chinese Communist Party. Post-war world. The post-war world saw a shift in the balance of power towards democracy, which created a favorable condition for the success of the Chinese Revolution. Here is an extremely detailed summary based on the sources in our conversation history, further elaborating on the key concepts and events, the military and political successes of the People's Democracy. The Chinese Communist Party, CCP, rallied the masses under the program of People's Democracy, leading to significant military victories against reactionary forces. This program facilitated the political transformation of the country, culminating in the creation of the People's Republic of China and achievements in economic construction in liberated regions. The People's Liberation Army, PLA, strategically exhausted the Kuomintang, KMT army through determined defense before launching a decisive offensive in September 1947. This offensive resulted in the liberation of Manchuria and northern China, followed by major defeats inflicted upon the KMT in the Central Plains. The PLA then advanced to the Yangtze River, capturing key political and economic centers, including Nanking, Wuhan, Nonchong, Shanghai, and Changsha, and continued battling in South China. By October 2, 1949, the PLA, numbering several million, had reached areas near Formosa and the provinces of Kwangtung, Guangxi, Sichuan, Kwaichow, and Xinjiang, liberating the majority of the Chinese population. The PLA liberated Canton on October 14, 1949, and cleared the northwest of KMT troops, liberating Daya, Xinjiang. The KMT army suffered significant losses in battles for Chongqing, Mukden, Tientsin, Peiping, Suichao, Nanking, Wuhan, and Shanghai. These losses, combined with the PLA's superior capability, led to the near incapacitation of the KMT forces. The reactionary camp experienced internal collapse under the PLA's powerful blows. The success was attributed to the Chinese people's unity under the CCP and their determination to achieve democracy, as well as support from the global democratic camp. Mao Zedong declared that the KMT forces would soon be completely defeated. These military and political successes created conditions for national unification, complete independence, and a genuinely people's democratic structure. The formation of the People's Republic of China, the People's Political Consultative Conference, PPCC, was convened following the CCP's proposal on May 1, 1948, after extensive negotiations with various democratic parties, groups, and people's organizations. The conference, held in Peiping on November 21, 1949, involved over 600 people from 45 organizations, representing a broad spectrum of Chinese society. The PPCC proclaimed the formation of the People's Republic of China and adopted crucial constitutional documents: the organic law of the Central People's Government, the statute, and the common program of the PPCC. The National Committee of the PPCC and a Central People's Government Council were also elected. Mao Zedong was elected as the chairman of the Government Council and of the National Committee of the PPCC. The capital was designated as Peking, Peiping. The red flag with 5 golden stars was confirmed as the national flag, and a provisional national anthem, March of the Volunteers, and the solar calendar were adopted. On October 1, 1949, the People's Government Council published a declaration, signed by Mao Zedong, announcing the creation of the central government and the adoption of the Common Program as its political platform. Key government appointments were Zhou Enlai as Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, Mao Zedong as Chairman of the National People's Revolutionary War Council, Zhu De as Commander-in-Chief of the PLA, Sun Chunju as Chief Justice, and Lo Wan-hien as Procurator General. The declaration asserted that the new government was the only lawful government representing the entire People's Republic of China and expressed readiness to establish diplomatic relations with countries respecting the principles of equality, mutual benefit, and territorial integrity. International recognition and support. The proclamation of the People's Republic of China marked the culmination of a long struggle against internal reaction and international imperialism. It was a demonstration of the strength of Marxist-Leninist teachings and a significant blow to imperialism. The formation of the People's Republic was met with enthusiasm both in China and among the international camp of peace and democracy. The Soviet Union was the first to recognize the People's Republic of China, offering moral support and establishing diplomatic relations on October 2, 1949. Within days, several other countries, including Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, Korea, and the Mongolian People's Republic, also recognized the new republic. These nations viewed the creation of the People's Republic of China as a significant strengthening of the international democratic and peace camp led by the Soviet Union. This alliance of states represented a large portion of the global population and territory. The proclamation of the People's Republic of China significantly undermined the machinations of international reaction, leading to further disintegration within its camp. Despite attempts by American imperialists, the Chinese people achieved independence and freedom. Mao Zedong declared that the Chinese nation would join the family of peace-loving nations. The distinctive features of the Chinese people's democracy. The system of people's democracy in China was seen as a basis for transitioning to a socialist path of development, similar to countries in Eastern Europe. This system carried out progressive reforms such as agrarian reforms and the elimination of the landlord class. It laid the foundation for state ownership of large-scale industry, transport, and banks, establishing a people's republic where power belongs to the people, led by the working class. The transition from capitalism to socialism through people's democracy involved a struggle against attempts to re-establish capitalism, a class struggle to liquidate capitalist elements, cooperation with the USSR, and participation in the anti-imperialist struggle. This system was not static, evolving economically and politically through internal contradictions, but directed towards strengthening socialist elements. The political and economic changes in the liberated regions demonstrated the core features of people's democracy, which included people's power, power of the toilers, and a leading role for the working class and its party. Before the formation of the People's Republic, the highest organs of power in liberated areas were the national and political councils, elected through general, direct, and equal suffrage, with secret ballots. These councils possessed legislative and administrative rights, controlled executive organs, and the CCP played a leading role in both councils and executive organs. A radical agrarian reform was implemented, transferring land and means of production from landlords and kulaks to the working peasantry. The state also took control of big industry, banks, and transport previously held by foreign imperialism and the Four Families. Mao Zedong defined the new Chinese economy as comprising a leading state sector, agriculture developing toward collectivism, the economy of small artisans and traders, and petty and medium private capital. This system was designed to lay the foundation for socialist development, similar to people's democracies in the West. The common program of the PPCC reflected the will of the Chinese people for a transitional development toward socialism. The common program of the People's Political Consultative Council. The program defined people's democracy as the political foundation for national construction, representing a form of state power through a people's democratic united front. It declared the People's Republic of China as a people's democratic state, led by the working class in alliance with the peasantry. It aimed to unite all democratic classes and national minorities against imperialism, feudalism, and bureaucratic capital. Key objectives of the People's Republic included abolishing imperialist prerogatives, confiscating bureaucratic capital for state ownership, carrying out agrarian reform, protecting public and cooperative property, and transforming the country from agricultural to industrial. The program guaranteed political rights, equal rights for women, equality of all nationalities, and suppression of counter-revolutionary activities, while depriving reactionary elements of political rights. It also declared solidarity with peace-loving nations, particularly the Soviet Union, in the struggle against imperialist aggression. The state power belonged to the people and was exercised through people's congresses, elected by universal suffrage and organs of people's power. The All China People's Congress was the supreme legislative organ, and the executive was the central people's government. The People's Political Consultative Council was to serve as a consultative organ. In newly liberated areas, state power was initially exercised through military authorities, then transferred to local conferences of representatives after agrarian reform and organization of the population. All Kuomintang laws oppressing the people would be abolished, while laws protecting people's interests would be enacted. The program also included a people's judicial system and supervisory organs for addressing public grievances. The program included the creation of unified armed forces combining the PLA and People's Public Security Forces, with a focus on political education, modernization, and the development of an air force and navy. The program acknowledged 5 sectors of the economy: state, cooperative, private peasant, private capitalist artisan, and state capitalism. The state sector held the leading role, being of a socialist character and including enterprises of national significance. The program emphasized the state's leadership over other sectors. The program aimed to encourage cooperative development and all private enterprises that benefited the people. State capitalism involved cooperation between state and private capital through joint management and leasing. Workers in state enterprises participated in management through administrative committees. The program guaranteed an 8 to 10-hour working day, minimum wage, social insurance, and protection for labor, while also protecting the rights of peasants to land received through the land reform. It also aimed to develop agriculture, rehabilitate heavy industry, control external trade, and regulate domestic trade, while also controlling finances and activities of private financial organizations. The leading role of public forms of the economy was emphasized, along with their primary development and the state's regulating role, a key feature of people's democracy in its path towards socialism. The cultural and educational policy aimed to develop social consciousness and disseminate progressive social ideas, national in form, scientific in content, and popular in character. The program advocated equality among all nationalities, with regional autonomy for national minorities, and a foreign policy of safeguarding independence, supporting universal peace, and fighting imperialist aggression. The principles of the program were aimed at ensuring the predominance of public elements and creating a basis for China's development towards a public economy. People's democracy in China was understood as a system laying the foundation for a transition to socialism. Specific features of people's democracy in China. People's democracy in China was being established through fierce armed conflict against domestic reaction and foreign imperialism. The process of development included some peculiarities and special features as a result of the semi-colonial and semi-feudal conditions. The main task was the rapid development of productive forces, particularly industry, to overcome economic backwardness and facilitate the transition from small-scale production to large-scale mechanized production, laying the foundations for socialism. People's democracy had to allow a period of coexistence and development for capitalist elements within certain limits, with the state ensuring its regulating role. The CCP's tactical line toward the middle and petty bourgeoisie recognized that, despite their bourgeois status, they could either participate in the new democratic revolution or remain neutral. The CCP warned against repeating ultra-left policies towards this sector. The new democratic revolution aimed to abolish the special privileges of imperialism and end the exploitation and oppression by landlords and bureaucratic bourgeoisie. Capitalist economy was expected to continue for some time after the revolution, with state ownership of key industries and the gradual move toward collective agriculture. The existence of middle and small capitalist elements was not considered a danger. The new Kulak economy was also not considered a danger after the agrarian revolution. The national bourgeoisie was important in offsetting imperialist pressure and advancing the economy, so China needed to use urban and rural capitalist enterprises beneficial to the national economy. The policy was to restrict capitalism, not destroy it, but the bourgeoisie could not hold a leading position in the state. Representatives of bourgeois liberal parties were participating in the PPCC, the National Committee, and the central government, which reflected in the common program with preserved economic interests of the national bourgeoisie, encouraging private enterprises beneficial to the people, and their participation in state capitalism. The participation of capitalist elements was similar to the new economic policy, NEP period in Soviet Russia, with political power and key economic positions held by the People's State, while ensuring that growth of socialist elements prevents the restoration of capitalism. Comrade Stalin defined NEP as a policy to build a socialist economy by utilizing the market, not by directly exchanging products without the market. He noted that the NEP was necessary for all capitalist countries during the transition to socialism. NEP was even more necessary in China, where people's democracy was being established amid fierce struggles against feudalism and imperialism, and where the national bourgeoisie could support democracy. This was also a period of completing the anti-imperialist and anti-feudal revolution, the revolutionizing influence of China on other oppressed peoples. The success of the Chinese People's Liberation Movement was a powerful influence on oppressed peoples in Southeast Asia, inspiring them to fight against imperialism. The success of the Chinese people was a demonstration of how imperialism and domestic reaction could be defeated through mass unification and determination. The Chinese Liberation Movement creatively applied the teachings of Lenin and Stalin and used the experience of the CPSU-B, which served as a vast treasury of revolutionary experience for oppressed peoples of the East. The experience of China showed the following to other oppressed peoples. The liberation struggle against imperialism is part of the broader struggle of the democratic camp, led by the Soviet Union. The struggle for democracy and the struggle against imperialism are intertwined, since only the defeat of imperialism can provide democratic rights and land to the people. The national bourgeoisie was not able to be a leader in national liberation movements, and only the working class and the Communist Party can ensure leadership for the interests of the people. The people can only fulfill their aspirations through a people's democratic movement, giving power to the working people, land to the peasants, and nationalizing the main branches of the economy. The example of China demonstrated the aggressive expansionist designs and deceptive tactics of American imperialism. The people could see in the example of China the falsity of every peaceful and democratic maneuver by American imperialism. The example of China exposed the close links between American imperialism and domestic reaction. The people could see through the example of China that American imperialism was directed towards converting all countries into agricultural and raw material appendages of the USA, further exploiting their resources, destroying the existing production apparatus and productive forces, and lowering the living standards of the working people. The experience of China showed that even economically weak nations can defeat imperialism by uniting and fighting with support from the democratic camp. Mao Zedong urged anti-imperialist forces to unite against imperialism and domestic reaction, to take their destiny into their own hands, and to fight for the liberation of oppressed people. The anti-imperialist struggle in Southeast Asia grew in response to the success of the Chinese liberation movement. Imperialists feared the successes of Chinese democracy and attempted to isolate it and obstruct the dissemination of its ideas. American imperialism was attempting to form a reactionary military alliance of Japan and Southeast Asian countries through the Pacific Pact against the USSR, Chinese democracy, and the People's Liberation Movement. American imperialism attempted to create a naval cordon against democratic China by seizing control of Japan, South Korea, and islands along the coast of China, establishing military bases to prevent ties between China and other oppressed countries. The historic victory of the Chinese people was a demonstration of the sharpening crisis of capitalism and the colonial system. China was a vast part of the imperialist rear, and after World War II, the U.S. planned to exploit the Chinese market. The Chinese people's victories destroyed these plans and demonstrated the groundlessness of American claims to world domination, transforming China into an integral part of the camp of peace, socialism, and democracy.